Phystion imparts wisdom on his namesake. By C.P.L. Adamantius. With the king of Optimople's blood flowing through his veins, Phystion the Elder was a man in his prime at 61 years. He wore a suit of lobstered titanium plates over energized tungsten tendons and steel servos, and controlled the powered armor's machine muscles with his natural techno-psionic talent. Unlike common soldiers, highborn warriors had no need for nerve ports. He knelt onto the cracked concrete deck of the arcology's substructure, gauntlets green with mutant blood, to take a closer look at his felled quarry. The hairless, albino squid boy was so twisted by generations of inbreeding and chemical corruption that it scarcely looked human. The Baron of Deck 75 wiped his hands off on the slain mutant's soiled tunic before standing. The old Baron's namesake, kinsman, and protege, Phystion the Younger, clad in his own suit of gilded titanium-powered armor, was not yet 20 years old. The Viscount of Section 11 stood watch with his rail rifle at the ready. His heart beat wildly under the aquila on his breastplate as cold forms moved in the shadows around them. His mentor had warned him that some mutants were nearly invisible in the dark even to heat vision. The acrid stink of corruption hung heavily on the air of the tunnels beneath Optimople. It was a miasma of sweetness and sex as much as death and decay that the two nobles could almost smell through their hermetically sealed helms. When the elder removed his eagle-crested helmet and tucked it under his arm, the younger first thought he had taken leave of his senses. But then he could see from the look on the old man's face that his mentor had another lesson for him. What makes a noble better than a pleb? The old baron asked. It seemed a stupid question to the young viscount. We are more perfectly formed and naturally beautiful. The young viscount answered only half-joking as he winced in disgust at the squid boy's slimy, pale body. If that were true, Prince Luxavier would not take common women for his concubines, and the Paladesio would not be filled with pleasure serfs recruited from every corner of the realm. In truth, such superficial qualities are the surest way for the common man, and more often woman, to rise to near peerage. The old baron asserted as he popped the hand incinerator off his magnetized hip and set the squid boy's body ablaze. Our bodies are more capable than common men, and we make better warriors, the young viscount proffered more seriously. They watched as the mutant's body curled into a twisted husk of charred, smoking flesh before resuming their hunt down the labyrinthine service tunnels of the substructure. It is certainly true that nobles make the finest warriors, but this cannot be due to physical ability, the old baron said as they marched. Low-born gladiators demonstrate far greater prowess than even the mightiest nobles, as what determines success on the battlefield is bravery above all else, including physical ability. But mustn't the gladiator have bravery to risk his life in the arena? The young viscount asked. The service tunnel poured into a larger tributary corridor flooded by a cacophony of cockroaches, and lined with the makeshift nests of polite society's many outcasts. They were mostly men too broken to work in the arcology proper, but there were some families huddled against the walls as well. Whores scurried about and roaches howled as the two nobles made their way through the colony of outcasts unmolested. The gladiator, much like the mercenary, need not be brave as he fights only for his own benefit, whereas even the lowest imperial conscript must fight for the benefit of others, the old baron responded. He flamed a pile of refuse at the side of the corridor, causing hundreds of rats to boil out of the burning trash and overrun the nearby nests. The gladiator may be stronger, the young viscount admitted as he crunched a fleeing rat beneath a gilded titanium sabaton. But other common folk are certainly weaker. Not so, the old baron declared. Most nobles would be crushed by the workload that common toilers endure for a lifetime, just as the pleb would be crushed by the weight of responsibility that the noble bears from even before he is born. He clarified before donning his helm and stopping for a moment to take in his surroundings through a wider spectrum of light. So then the noble must be superior of mind to bear his worldly responsibilities, the young Viscount surmised. He followed the old baron as he tracked a stream of fleeing rats past a beheaded statue of Christ Invictus through the burnt ruins of a chapel, and past a shrine of skulls to their next hiding place. Many believe that the difference lies in the mind, that nobles are just smarter than the common folk, but this isn't the case either, for finding a noble with the know-how to fix a broken machine, or to perform surgery is truly rare, the old baron said. He inspected a wall covered in glyphs with a sickening xeno-like quality to them, and broke through the boards blocking a side corridor with one swift chop of his armored hand. Red-hot metal shards broke upon the baron's armor like a wave on a cliff, followed closely by the crack of gunpowder. The Jovian guffaw of the young Viscount's rail rifle rang out as he slew the hiding mutant. For the briefest of moments, the corridor was utterly silent as even the cockroaches kept quiet. The roaches resumed their screaming as they took a closer look at their prey. The mutant was a fork-tongued hermaphrodite with 3 eyes, one milky white, one as green as grass, and an oil-black one in the middle of its forehead. Its mutation must have been mild since it still had red blood like a normal man, though it had many grotesque surgical modifications that proved the existence of a thoroughly degenerate mind. They both recognized it as one of the prince's missing bastards. So then it seems that there is no difference at all, and that nobles are no better than the common folk, the young Viscount said coldly. The mutant gave out a final gurgling breath as the light faded from its green eye. Strangely, its black eye still seemed to be watching them. Many of the smarter plebs would agree with this line of thinking and go no further, but to do so is simply to deny the obvious, the old baron said as he leveled his sidearm at the fallen bastard's body and flamed it. No, the true difference lies not in the mind but in the soul. So God chose us to be better? The young Viscount asked sincerely. They did not linger in the mutant's nest for long, taking only a moment to ensure there were no other sinful creatures to purge. Heavens no, the old baron said with a fatherly chuckle, as with all matters of the spirit, the choice is always our own. Are there not nobles who fail to live up to their place in the world in which Christ Invictus has placed them? Those who succumb to their vices and falter in their responsibilities? Certainly, Archduke Carlin is wretchedly fat and greedy, and his arcology suffers under his rule. That is why Prince Luxavier wishes to replace him as planetary proconsul, the young Viscount answered as they resumed their hunt. And cannot a common man embody what it means to be noble? The old baron asked. Not far from the hermaphrodite's nest they passed a small camp of outcasts that a patrol of legionaries were inspecting for contraband and corruption. Half a dozen youngsters in restraints were seated nearby, including a boy no older than 10 fitted with a psych inhibitor. Not as I see it, the young Viscount responded. A gang of demoniacs in glowing green war paint and horned helmets watched the legionaries from the far end of the corridor. When the xenophilic scum spied the 2 nobles, they sped off on their tunnel crawlers and pipe bikes. What of Ministerialis Mudley? The old baron asked as they continued their hunt down a leaky side tunnel, leaving the legionaries to their duty. His arcology flourishes under his rule, yet he was born a serf. A trail of green blood led them to an injured mutant that had crawled inside an air duct and gotten stuck, yet even this pitiful creature could not help itself from attacking them. Its acidic vomit dissolved the gilding on the young Viscount's armor, as he reached in the duct to pull it out. He jerked back hard, too hard, pulling the top half of the mutant, and a long stream of green entrails, out of the air vent. The soiled noble threw the writhing half-mutant to the floor, and crushed its skull with a swift stomp like it was a ripe melon. I had forgotten about Mudley, the young Viscount admitted, so then aren't we back to nobles and plebs being equal? Absolutely not, the old Baron said as he reached into the vent to pull the bottom half of the mutant onto the floor, then flamed both of its halves. Would you agree that our prince is at least as good a man as Mudley? He asked. Clearly he is even the better man, the young Viscount answered without hesitation. He redirected his armor's power supply to sheath himself in plasma, and burn off the mutant's vomit, blood, and brains. And would you say that our prince is a rarity among even his own kind? The old Baron asked leadingly. Yes, indeed, for there are not 1 in 10 nobles who could hope to be his equal, the young Viscount followed. The fiery nobleman cut the plasma sheath, and restored power to his armor's machine muscles, so he could move again. The once gilded titanium plates of his armor now sported a black carbon crust. Such is the case for common men as well, except that it took over 1 billion breeding plebs to produce 1 competent overlord, whereas every noble family produces at least 1 every generation. For those that don't are quickly snuffed out by their rivals, the old Baron concluded. So then God does choose the nobility to be the better men, the young Viscount regressed. Not at all, for it is men who choose to be noble or pleb, the old Baron clarified. What best defines a pleb is their willingness to accept a life of servitude. No matter how highborn or smart or strong or beautiful or otherwise indispensable they may be. The cowardly class never demands the complete sovereignty of their being, whereas even the pettiest of nobles would rebel against his own beloved emperor if even the slightest of his natural rights were threatened. And that is why nobles make the greatest warriors, for we would rather fight to the death than to give up our freedom, the young Viscount divined as he took the lead on their hunt. Doesn't that mean that nobles are the only true free men? He asked. Precisely, and that all lesser men are slaves to 1 degree or another, the old Baron confirmed. The 2 Phystions slew 12 more mutants before retiring to the prince's penthouse for afternoon tea.